What if in the 1960s, at the height of decolonization, when most African nations achieved independence from European powers, they didn't all go their separate ways? What if instead they united to form one massive African nation spanning the entire continent? This is a history that never happened, a world that could have been. Today we are going to find out what would have happened if Africa had become a united federation in the 1960s. Would it have become a global superpower? How would it compare to the United States? Let's find out. The year is 1963. Across the African continent, the winds of change are blowing. One by one, formerly colonized African nations are declaring independence from European colonial powers. Ghana, Nigeria, Algeria, Guinea, Egypt, the Congo. By the end of this decade, over 20 new African republics will be born. But many of these fledgling states share a common vision. Inspired by the burgeoning Pan-African movement, which calls for unity among people of African descent worldwide, several leaders dream of a greater, more unified Africa. But why wouldn't they want to unite? First off, they all speak different languages. There are 5 major language groups and dozens of languages within those groups. And there's not even one single religion that unites them all. The main thing that brings them together is that they were all recently colonized and still suffer the effects of colonialism. They see unity as a way to overcome the economic, political, and social challenges they face. So how would this massive new nation look if it did unite? For starters, it would span over 30 million square kilometers, almost twice the size of the United States. In terms of population, it would be a giant as well, home to over 200 million people, more than 3 times the population of the U.S. in the 1960s. In fact, it would be the most populated nation on Earth. But what kind of government would this new country have? As far as we know, none of the leaders seriously considered a monarchy as a viable option, not even the Ashanti of Ghana, who had an unbroken line of kings dating back centuries. Most likely, it would have been some sort of federal system with representatives from each region or state having a say in a central government. Some scholars believe that Nigeria's first prime minister, Abubakar Tafawa Balewa, was being groomed to lead this united Africa. Other possible candidates for leadership positions include Ghana's Kwame Nkrumah and Jomo Kenyatta of Kenya. For the capital, several cities were mentioned as possible locations, including Accra, Lagos, Dakar, and Addis Ababa. But ultimately the choice might have come down to Cairo, the most populous city on the continent and home to many important historical sites, or Kinshasa, the capital of the Congo, and at the time the second largest city in Africa. Economically, a united Africa would have been an absolute powerhouse. It would have controlled all of the world's supply of many valuable resources, including diamonds, gold, uranium, copper, rubber, timber, and coffee. Having unified control over these resources would have given them significant leverage over the world economy. Plus, without borders between them, trade would have been much easier. It's estimated that intra-African trade could have doubled or tripled had borders not been an issue. One proposal even suggested creating a single African currency to replace the multitude of national currencies that had been established. Had they done so, it would have been the world's second most valuable currency behind only the US dollar. Infrastructure would have been another area greatly improved by unification. Several railway lines already connected various parts of the continent, particularly in West and East Africa. These railways would form the backbone of a continental rail network connecting major cities and facilitating the transport of goods. Highways would connect major cities and enable easier movement across the continent. But building new roads would have been less of a priority since the cost of maintaining existing colonial roads was so high. Both France and Britain spent millions annually on road maintenance in their respective spheres of influence. Speaking of infrastructure, a united power grid could have also been established, though due to the lack of technology in the 1960s, it would likely have been limited to just a few countries initially. Still, once established, it could have easily spread across the rest of the continent. Internal trade would have benefited tremendously from the lack of border restrictions. In today's Africa, it can take a week to ship goods from Nigeria to Kenya because of all the borders in between. But had Africa been a single nation, goods could travel freely and quickly throughout. Culturally, a united Africa would have had immense power. With so many people sharing one identity, Pan-Africanism would have become a worldwide movement overnight. Millions of people of African descent in Europe, North and South America and Asia would have rallied around their homeland. Pan-African education systems would have been established and taught in schools across the continent. And with a population of over 200 million, Africa would have had the world's largest youth population. This demographic bulge would have led to a Pan-African cultural renaissance, a flowering of art, literature, music and film celebrating their shared heritage. And with over 200 million people, it would have been nearly impossible for Western media to ignore. Over time, Africa's influence would have extended beyond its borders, uniting people of African descent across the globe into one big family. Politically, if Africa had remained united, it would have been a completely different world on the global stage. While many of the newly independent nations were aligned with either the United States or the Soviet Union during the Cold War, a united Africa would have been a formidable third superpower. It would have tipped the balance of power away from the Western Bloc and forced the US to seek a new ally. This new Africa would have made the Cold War much colder. During the era of decolonization, the US and USSR competed fiercely for influence over newly independent nations. Many African countries became pawns in this global chess match. However, had they been united, they would have been less vulnerable to outside pressures. As a neutral superpower, it would have been a major player in global affairs, shaping international relations, possibly becoming a leader in global diplomacy. In terms of military strength, a united Africa would have been a force to be reckoned with. With a large population, it would have had a huge pool of potential soldiers. Furthermore, having a strong military would have been essential to defend the continent's newly won sovereignty against any potential European attempts at reconquest or other foreign aggressions. The army would also play a vital role in maintaining order and stability within the vast and diverse nation. African armed forces would have been comparable to those of the superpowers, enabling it to play a significant role in global security and peacekeeping efforts. Cooperation with other nations would have become more feasible, leading to joint military exercises and alliances. And the shared threat of external aggression would have served as a unifying factor for the various ethnic groups within the country. Stability within the country would have made it more attractive for neighboring nations to join. Over time, the military would have played a key role in defending and promoting the interests of the African superpower on the global stage. Unfortunately, the road ahead for this great nation would have been fraught with challenges. Despite the dreams of a unified Africa, ethnic tensions, corruption, coups, and external interferences threatened to tear the continent apart. Even if it did manage to stay united, it would have been plagued by poor governance, something that still plagues the continent to this day. Additionally, the legacy of colonialism deeply impacted the socio-political landscape of post-colonial Africa. The arbitrary borders drawn by European powers divided ethnic groups, created linguistic barriers, and uneven distribution of resources, all of which sowed the seeds of future conflicts. Despite this, let's imagine that somehow Africa did remain unified. How would that have changed the world? Well, for one, the world's geopolitical structure would have looked completely different. The presence of a powerful neutral African superpower would have forced both the US and USSR to seek alternative allies, potentially leading to a more balanced global power dynamic. Africa's vast natural resources would have contributed significantly to its growth, propelling it to become a dominant global economic power by the 21st century. Furthermore, it would have fostered closer ties with other developing nations, forming strategic partnerships to further their collective interests on the world stage. A united Africa would have also become a powerhouse in global diplomacy, leveraging its status as a neutral power to mediate conflicts and promote peace. Its influential role in international organizations could have led to increased representation and decision-making power. And with a larger population and abundant youth, Africa's demographic dividend could have solidified its position as a dominant global player. Lastly, a unified Africa would have fostered a sense of Pan-African pride and identity, shaping a stronger, more influential voice for Africans worldwide. Though we can only speculate about what might have been, one thing is clear: a united Africa would have been a powerful force to be reckoned with. Thanks to colonialism, Africa would eventually fall into horrible conflicts and regimes like South Africa's apartheid. A unified Africa would have put massive pressure on these regimes, perhaps even causing South Africa to abolish apartheid early. It may very well have changed the course of the 20th century. Now check out what-if scenarios for other regions of the world. Or watch this video instead.